The morning Sarah Chen discovered what lay hidden in the old well behind her uncle's ranch, she had no idea that within 48 hours an FBI helicopter would be landing in her overgrown pasture, or that the director himself would step out demanding answers she wasn't prepared to give. What started as a desperate single mother's last chance at a fresh start would unravel a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government and force her to choose between her family's safety and exposing a truth that powerful people had killed to keep buried. The rusted wheel of the well creaked as she peered into the darkness, her flashlight beam catching something metallic far below. In that moment, as her hands gripped the weathered stones, Sarah couldn't have imagined that this discovery would transform not just her own life, but the fate of an entire community that had written her off as another city dweller destined to fail. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ancient pickup truck wheezed and rattled as Sarah Chen navigated the winding mountain road towards Sage Creek, Montana, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, 12-year-old Emma pressed her face against the window, watching endless stretches of grassland roll by under the vast September sky. Everything they owned was crammed into a small U-Haul trailer, bouncing precariously behind them. The sum total of their life in Seattle reduced to boxes labeled kitchen and Emma's room. Sarah caught her reflection in the rearview mirror and hardly recognized herself. The polished IT security specialist who once commanded six-figure salaries at tech firms had been replaced by a woman with worry lines etched around tired hazel eyes. 3 months of unemployment after her company's merger, followed by an eviction notice, had brought her to this moment of absolute last resort. The letter from the attorney had arrived just when she'd been calculating how many weeks of groceries their remaining savings could provide. Her great-uncle, William Morrison, whom she'd met exactly twice in her 34 years, had passed away, leaving her his ranch in some place called Sage Creek. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind. The property consists of 850 acres, though. I should warn you, Ms. Chen, that it hasn't been actively ranched in over a decade. The land value in current market conditions is modest. Modest was lawyer speak for worthless, Sarah had quickly learned. Every real estate agent she'd contacted had delivered the same verdict. Too remote, too run down, surrounding area economically depressed. One had actually laughed when she'd asked about selling it quickly. Ma'am, properties like that in Sage Creek have been sitting on the market for years. You'd be lucky to get enough to cover the back taxes. Emma shifted in her seat, finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since crossing the Montana state line. Mom, are you sure about this? I mean, what do we know about ranching? Sarah forced a smile she didn't feel. We'll figure it out, sweetheart. People have been learning new things since the beginning of time. Besides, it's just temporary until I can find another tech job and we can get back on our feet. The truth was Sarah had no idea what they were doing. Her expertise lay in cybersecurity protocols and data encryption, not cattle and crops. The closest she'd come to rural life was debugging code for an agricultural software company 5 years ago. But with their apartment lease terminated and her professional network exhausted, the inherited ranch represented their only option that didn't involve moving in with her hypercritical mother in Florida. As they descended into the valley, Sage Creek revealed itself gradually. First came the scattered ranches, their buildings weathered by decades of harsh winters and scorching summers. Then the outskirts of town materialized. A decommissioned railroad depot, an abandoned grain elevator with its paint peeling like old skin, and finally Main Street itself. Sarah slowed the truck, taking in the town that would be their new home. Dusty's Diner occupied a corner lot, its neon sign missing several letters. Bradley's Hardware and Feed stood opposite, its windows cluttered with handwritten sale signs. The Whispering Pines Inn looked like it hadn't seen a renovation since the Eisenhower administration. A few pickup trucks were parked diagonally along the street, but foot traffic was sparse for a Tuesday afternoon. "It looks like a movie set," Emma whispered, "like one of those places where something weird happens and suddenly zombies appear." "No zombies," Sarah assured her, though privately she wondered if economic death counted. Just rural charm. They passed the town's single traffic light, and Sarah consulted the hand-drawn map the lawyer had provided. 10 miles out of town, past the old Garrett place, turn right at the Crooked Oak. The directions felt like something from another century, but eventually she spotted the landmark and turned onto a gravel road that had seen better decades. The Morrison Ranch sign hung askew from a wooden arch, its letters barely visible under layers of weathering. As they drove under it, Sarah felt a weight settle onto her shoulders. This was it, their Hail Mary pass, their last chance to avoid the humiliation of complete failure. The ranch house came into view, and Sarah's heart sank further. The photos the lawyer had sent hadn't done justice to the property's state of decay. Paint peeled from wooden siding like diseased bark. The wraparound porch sagged dramatically on one side. Several windows were boarded up, and the roof had enough missing shingles to create a patchwork effect. Behind the house, a massive barn leaned at an angle that defied physics, and various outbuildings stood in different stages of collapse. Sarah parked near what she assumed was the front of the house and killed the engine. The silence that followed felt overwhelming, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle from a neighboring property. "Well," Emma said with forced brightness, "at least we won't have noisy neighbors." They climbed out of the truck, stretching muscles cramped from the 2-day drive. The air smelled different here, sage and dust and something else Sarah couldn't identify. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermal currents against the endless blue sky. The front door's lock had rusted solid, but the back entrance yielded to Sarah's shoulder. They stepped into a kitchen that time had forgotten. Linoleum cracked beneath their feet, and cabinet doors hung at odd angles. The refrigerator, a Harvest Gold model from the 1970s, hummed with concerning irregularity. Emma explored while Sarah stood frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of their situation. Every room revealed new disasters: water stains on ceilings, warped floorboards, evidence of mice in the pantry. The furniture was sparse and dated, covered in dust thick enough to write in. They were examining a bedroom where faded cowboy wallpaper peeled from the walls when the sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. Through the grimy window, Sarah watched a new pickup truck navigate the driveway, coming to a stop. Beside their ancient vehicle, a man in his 60s emerged, wearing the uniform of rural America, worn jeans, boots, and a pearl snap shirt. His weathered face bore the permanent tan of someone who'd spent a lifetime under the Montana sun. He approached the house with the confident gait of someone who belonged here, unlike Sarah, who still felt like an intruder in her own property. Sarah met him at the back door, Emma hovering behind her. "Afternoon," the man said, touching the brim of his hat. "Jake Martinez. I ranch the property next to yours. Heard someone was finally coming to claim Bill's place." "Sarah Chen," she replied, shaking his offered hand. His grip was firm, calloused. "This is my daughter, Emma." Jake's eyes swept over them, taking in Sarah's designer jeans and Emma's gaming t-shirt with an expression that wasn't quite disapproval, but certainly skepticism. "Chen. Your Bill's great niece, then? The one from Seattle?" "That's right." Sarah wondered how much the local gossip network had already disseminated about their arrival. "Computer work," Bill said. "Some kind of internet security?" The way Jake pronounced internet suggested it was a foreign concept barely worth acknowledging. "IT security, yes, but I'm between positions right now." Jake nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the U-Haul trailer. Planning to stay long? We're going to give ranching a try, Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. The corner of Jake's mouth twitched in what might have been suppressed amusement. Ranching. I see. Well, this place hasn't seen active ranching since Bill's health went downhill. That'd be, 12 years ago? Maybe 13? I understand. There's work to be done, Sarah said carefully. Work. Jake repeated the word like he was tasting it. Ma'am, no disrespect intended, but this place needs more than work. It needs a miracle, or about $500,000 in repairs and equipment. Emma tugged at Sarah's sleeve. Mom, we'll manage, Sarah insisted. I'm a quick learner. Jake studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. Well, you'll need supplies. Feed store closes at 5. Dusty's Diner is open till 8 if you need dinner. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Word of advice, don't mention you're from Seattle. Folks around here have particular opinions about city people buying up ranch land. But I inherited it, Sarah protested. Makes no difference to some folks. Outsider is an outsider. He touched his hat brim again. Ma'am, miss, you need anything, I'm the next place over, though I should mention, most newcomers don't last the winter. With that cheerful pronouncement, Jake Martinez returned to his truck and drove away, leaving a dust cloud that seemed to mock their presence. Sarah and Emma stood in the doorway, watching until the truck disappeared over a rise. Mom, Emma said quietly, what have we done? Sarah put an arm around her daughter's shoulders, pulling her close. We've started over, Em. Sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can do. But as she surveyed the dilapidated kingdom they'd inherited, Sarah wondered if bravery and foolishness were just different words for the same mistake. The next morning arrived with a spectacular sunrise that painted the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Sarah had barely slept, kept awake by the unfamiliar sounds of the old house settling and the overwhelming list of tasks that needed immediate attention. She found Emma already up, sitting on the back steps with a cup of instant coffee, staring out at the vast expanse of their property. Couldn't sleep either? Sarah asked, joining her daughter. Emma shook her head. It's so quiet here, it's actually loud. Does that make sense? Sarah understood perfectly. The absence of city noise, no traffic, no sirens, no neighbors, created its own kind of pressure. Out here, you could hear your own thoughts too clearly. They spent the morning attempting to make the kitchen habitable. The ancient refrigerator wheezed its last breath around 10 o'clock, forcing them to transfer their meager supplies to a cooler. The stove's burners worked sporadically, and the faucet delivered water in an alarming shade of brown. We need supplies, Sarah announced, consulting the list she'd been compiling. And probably a plumber, and an electrician, and possibly an exorcist for whatever's living in the walls. The drive into Sage Creek felt different in daylight. Sarah noticed details she'd missed the day before. The boarded-up shops on side streets, the faded for sale signs that looked permanent, the way paint peeled from every surface, as if the town itself was slowly disappearing. Bradley's Hardware and Feed occupied a building that had probably been impressive in 1950. Now it wore its age like a bad suit, with mismatched additions and a roof that sagged in the middle. A bell announced their entrance, and Sarah found herself in a maze of narrow aisles packed with everything from chicken feed to plumbing supplies. Tom Bradley emerged from behind a counter cluttered with invoices and catalogs. He was younger than Jake Martinez, perhaps mid-50s, with the soft build of someone who spent more time behind a register than in the fields. Help you folks? We're looking for, well, everything, Sarah admitted. I've just inherited the Morrison place. Tom's expression shifted, a combination of surprise and something else. pity, perhaps. Bill's niece? Heard you might be coming. From Seattle, right? Sarah wondered if everyone in town already knew their entire history. Great niece, actually, and yes, Seattle. Computer work, Tom said, as if confirming information from a dossier. Shame about Bill. Good man. Quiet in his later years, but good. Ranch has been sitting empty a while. So people keep telling me, Sarah said dryly. Tom began pulling items from shelves as Sarah read from her list. Extension cords, work gloves, cleaning supplies, basic tools. The pile on the counter grew steadily, along with the mental tally Sarah was keeping. You'll want to talk to Frank Morrison, Tom said as he rang up their purchases. Bill's old foreman lives in town now. He knows that property better than anyone. Morrison, any relation? Bill's nephew, different side of the family from you. Frank worked that ranch for 30 years before Bill's health forced him to shut down operations. He's usually at Dusty's for lunch. The total came to more than Sarah had hoped, but less than she'd feared. As she counted out bills from their dwindling cash reserve, Tom added, "Word of advice, don't let folks know you're planning to ranch. Not at first. There's been history with outsiders coming in with big plans." What kind of history? Tom's expression closed off slightly. Just trust me on this. Keep your plans quiet until you know the lay of the land. They loaded their purchases and headed to Dusty's Diner, which occupied a corner building with large windows overlooking Main Street. The interior was a time capsule of vinyl booths and formica tables with a long counter where several men in work clothes hunched over coffee cups. The conversation dulled as Sarah and Emma entered. Every eye tracked their movement to a booth near the window. A woman in her 60s with silver hair, pulled back in a tight bun, approached with menus and a coffee pot. "Afternoon, honey. You must be the Chen family. I'm Maria Santos. I own this place." Sarah was starting to feel like they were wearing signs announcing their outsider status. "News travels fast here," Maria laughed, a warm sound that seemed genuine. "Honey, news is the only thing that moves fast in Sage Creek. What'll you have?" They ordered sandwiches and asked about Frank Morrison. Maria pointed to a man sitting alone at the counter reading a newspaper. He looked to be in his 70s, thin and weathered, with calloused hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "Frank?" Maria called. "Bill's family is here." Frank Morrison turned slowly, studying them with pale blue eyes set in a face mapped by decades of sun and wind. He nodded once, then returned to his newspaper. "Don't mind him," Maria whispered. "He took Bill's passing hard." They were close. Sarah approached the counter hesitantly. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Sarah Chen. I understand you worked for my great-uncle." Frank didn't look up. 32 years. "I was hoping we could talk about the ranch. I'm trying to understand what needs to be done to get it operational again." Now Frank did look at her, his expression unreadable. "Operational? You planning to ranch?" "That's the idea." Frank snorted softly. "Seattle woman with a computer. Job wants to ranch. I've heard everything now." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm a quick learner." "Oi, ranching isn't something you learn from YouTube videos, Miss Chen. It's generational knowledge. It's understanding the land, the seasons, the animals. It's knowing which pasture to graze when, how to read weather patterns, when to sell, and when to hold. It's a lifetime of accumulated wisdom." "Then help me," Sarah said. "You have that knowledge. Share it." Frank turned back to his newspaper. "That ranch died with Bill. Some things are better left buried." The cryptic response hung between them. Sarah waited, but Frank seemed to have dismissed her entirely. She returned to their booth where Emma picked at her sandwich. The men at the counter had resumed their conversation, but Sarah caught occasional glances in their direction. "He seems friendly," Emma muttered. "They all do," Sarah replied, keeping her voice low. "I get the feeling we're about as welcome as a rattlesnake in a sleeping bag." Maria appeared with pie slices they hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said, sliding the plates onto their table. "Don't let the cold shoulders get to you. Sage Creek's seen its share of outsiders come and go, usually developers wanting to buy up ranch land for vacation homes or corporate operations that promise jobs, then disappear. People are just cautious." "We're not developers," Sarah protested. "I inherited that ranch. It's been in my family for generations." "No, but you haven't been," Maria said gently. "Bill talked about his family sometimes. Big city folks who hadn't set foot in Montana since his sister moved away in the 50s. To people here, you might share blood, but you're still strangers." After lunch, they drove back to the ranch in subdued silence. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and Sarah noticed for the first time how brown everything looked. Not the golden brown of autumn, but the dead brown of drought and neglect. They spent the rest of the day cleaning and organizing, trying to make at least one room livable. As evening approached, Sarah decided to explore the property beyond the immediate vicinity of the house. "Want to come for a walk?" she asked Emma, who was sprawled on a dubious couch reading on her phone. "No signal anyway," Emma sighed, standing and stretching. They set out across what had once been the main pasture, grass crunching beneath their feet. The land rolled gently toward a line of cottonwoods that marked the course of a creek, though Sarah noticed the creek bed was bone dry. Various outbuildings dotted the property in different states of decay. They passed a chicken coop with its wire mesh torn and flapping, an equipment shed with a partially collapsed roof, and finally arrived at a small stone structure set apart from the others. "What's this?" Emma asked, circling what appeared to be an old well. The well was constructed of carefully fitted stones, rising about 3 feet from the ground. A wooden cover, grey with age, sat askew across the opening. Metal framework that had once supported a bucket system stood rusted and bent. Sarah lifted the wooden cover, surprised by its weight. The late afternoon sun slanted across the opening, revealing darkness below. She pulled out her phone and activated the flashlight, directing the beam downward. "See anything?" Emma peered over her shoulder. "Just darkness. Must go down pretty far." Sarah leaned further over the edge, angling her light to catch the walls. "Wait, there's something." About 20 feet down, caught on what looked like a metal bracket protruding from the stone wall, something glinted in the beam of her flashlight. "What is it?" Emma asked excitedly. "I can't tell. Something metallic, maybe an old bucket." But even as she said it, Sarah didn't think so. The shape was wrong. Too rectangular, too uniform. They searched the area and found a length of old rope in the nearby shed. Sarah tested it carefully. It seemed solid enough despite its age. "We should probably wait," she said, even as she began tying the rope to the well's metal framework. "Get proper equipment." "Or we could just look now," Emma countered with a grin. "You're always saying I should be more adventurous." Against her better judgment, Sarah fashioned a crude harness and began lowering herself into the well. The stones were cool and damp, covered in patches of moss. Her flashlight clenched between her teeth, threw weird shadows as she descended. The object was lodged behind a piece of bent metal that had probably once been part of the bucket system. As Sarah got closer, she could see it was a metal box, about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in what appeared to be oilcloth. She reached for it carefully, working it free from its position. The box was heavier than expected, and something shifted inside as she lifted it. With one hand gripping the rope and the other clutching the box, Sarah began the awkward climb back up. "Got it!" she called to Emma, who helped pull her over the edge. They sat on the ground beside the well, both breathing heavily. The box sat between them, its oilcloth covering torn and stained, but largely intact. "Should we open it?" Emma asked. Sarah unwrapped the covering carefully. Beneath was a military-style ammunition box, its latches rusted but functional. She worked them open, her heart pounding with anticipation of what? Old photos? Money? Family documents? The lid creaked open, revealing contents wrapped in plastic. Sarah peeled back the layers to find several items, a leather journal wrapped in more plastic, what appeared to be old maps, and at the bottom, a collection of small glass vials containing soil samples, each carefully labeled with coordinates. But it was the journal that drew her attention. She opened it carefully, finding pages filled with neat handwriting. The first entry was dated 1943. Property survey commissioned by United States Geological Survey, confidential, strategic minerals. Assessment program. Sarah's eyebrows rose. She flipped through more pages, finding detailed notes about mineral deposits, geological formations, and most intriguingly, repeated references to something called Operation Granite Shield. "Mom, look at this," Emma said, holding up one of the maps. It showed their ranch and surrounding area, but with strange markings. Symbols Sarah didn't recognize, color-coded zones, and what appeared to be underground tunnel systems marked in red ink. Sarah turned back to the journal, scanning entries that became increasingly cryptic. References to anomalous readings and unprecedented concentrations appeared frequently. Then toward the middle of the journal, she found an entry that made her blood run cold. Sample analysis confirms presence of weapons-grade uranium deposits. Concentration levels exceed Manhattan Project requirements by factor of 10. Recommend immediate classification and property seizure under National Security Directive. But the next entry, dated a week later, was even more disturbing. Project terminated by direct order, all evidence to be destroyed, cover story implemented, local. Contacts eliminated, ranch to be maintained as inactive to prevent investigation. Sarah's hands trembled as she continued reading. The journal detailed a conspiracy that stretched from the 1940s through the 1990s, involving illegal uranium mining, government cover-ups, and what appeared to be several murders disguised as accidents. "Mom!" Emma's voice seemed to come from far away. "What is it?" Sarah looked up, her mind racing. The worthless ranch they'd inherited wasn't worthless at all. It sat atop one of the largest uranium deposits ever discovered on American soil, a deposit the government had kept secret for nearly 80 years. And according to the journal, people had died to keep that secret. "We need to go back to the house," Sarah said, quickly gathering the materials. "Now." But as they turned to leave, Sarah spotted a dust cloud on the horizon, vehicles approaching fast on the ranch road. Too many vehicles for a social call. Her phone, which had shown no signal all day, suddenly buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "Ms. Chen, we need to discuss what you've found. For your safety and your daughter's, please remain where you are. Director Walsh, FBI." Sarah grabbed Emma's hand, her mind calculating distances and options. The vehicles were closing fast, and there was nowhere to run. Whatever they'd uncovered in that well had triggered something that brought the FBI racing to their door within minutes of the discovery. As the first black SUV crested the hill, Sarah realized their quiet new life in Sage Creek had just become anything but quiet. The secrets buried beneath their land were about to surface, and she had a sinking feeling that knowing the truth might be far more dangerous than ignorance had ever been. The black SUVs rolled to a stop in a perfect tactical formation, doors opening simultaneously as agents in dark suits emerged. Sarah counted 8 of them, plus whoever remained in the vehicles. Her hand tightened on Emma's shoulder as a tall man with graying temples stepped forward, his FBI credentials already in hand. "Ms. Chen, Director Robert Walsh, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I believe we need to have an urgent conversation." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, her IT security training kicking in. There was no way they could have responded this quickly unless they were already monitoring the property, which meant they'd known about the uranium deposits all along. How did you know you were here? Know what you'd find? Walsh's expression remained carefully neutral. Ma'am, this ranch has been under periodic surveillance since 1943. The moment you broke the seal on that well, sensors alerted our field office. Emma pressed closer to her mother. Mum, what's happening? That's what I'm trying to understand, Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. Director Walsh, my daughter and I have done nothing wrong. We were simply exploring our own property. Walsh nodded slowly. No one's suggesting you've committed a crime, Ms. Chen, but you have stumbled onto a matter of national security that dates back to World War II. What you're holding could destabilize financial markets, trigger international incidents, and potentially expose intelligence operations spanning 8 decades. Sarah glanced down at the journal and documents clutched against her chest. These are historical documents about our family's land. Nothing more. We both know that's not true, Walsh said quietly. He gestured toward the house. Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more comfortable. Your daughter looks exhausted. Sarah hesitated, weighing options. Running was impossible, and she needed to understand what they'd gotten involved in. Fine, but I want everything on record, and I want a lawyer present, of course. Though I should mention, Ms. Chen, that involving attorneys at this stage might unnecessarily complicate matters. We're not here as adversaries. In fact, we need your help. The living room felt even smaller with Walsh and 2 other agents present. Sarah had insisted Emma sit beside her on the sagging couch, the journal and documents placed carefully on the coffee table between them and the FBI officials. Before we begin, Walsh said, settling into an armchair that creaked ominously, I need to inform you that this conversation involves classified information. What I'm about to share has been protected at the highest levels of government since 1943. Are you requiring us to sign something? Sarah asked. No, but I need you to understand the gravity of the situation. Lives have been lost protecting, and these secrets, others have been ruined. The fact that you've discovered these documents creates a delicate situation. Sarah felt Emma tense beside her. Are you threatening us? Quite the opposite, Walsh assured her. I'm trying to protect you, but I need you to understand what you've uncovered. He gestured toward the journal. May I? Sarah nodded reluctantly. Walsh picked up the journal with surprising reverence, handling it like a religious artifact. In 1942, the Manhattan Project was desperate for uranium. Every potential source was investigated. A geological survey team discovered massive deposits here in Sage Creek Valley. The concentrations were unprecedented, some of the richest ore ever found on American soil. So why wasn't it mined? Sarah asked. The journal mentions it was weapons-grade quality. Walsh's expression darkened, because the survey team discovered something else, something that changed everything. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. The uranium here isn't naturally occurring, at least not in the traditional sense. Sarah frowned. I don't understand. Neither did they at first. The isotope ratios were wrong. The distribution patterns defied geological explanation. It took them months to realize what they were looking at. Walsh leaned forward. Ms. Chen, the uranium deposits beneath your ranch are the result of a cosmic event. Approximately 12,000 years ago, a massive meteorite struck this area. But it wasn't just any meteorite. Emma spoke, up for the first time. Are you saying aliens or something? Walsh almost smiled. Not aliens, young lady, but the meteorite contained elements and isotopes that don't naturally occur on Earth. When it impacted, it created a unique geological formation. The uranium here isn't just weapons grade. It has properties that could revolutionize energy production, or create weapons that make nuclear bombs look like firecrackers. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. And the government has known this for 80 years. A select few have known. Presidents, certain cabinet members, a handful of scientists. The decision was made to keep the site dormant rather than risk the technology falling into the wrong hands. Your great-uncle was part of the original survey team. He agreed to maintain the ranch as cover to prevent development or investigation. But the journal mentions people being eliminated, Sarah said carefully. It talks about murders. Walsh's expression hardened. The early years were different. Decisions were made that wouldn't be acceptable today. When locals started asking questions, when a reporter from Denver got too close to the truth, measures were taken. I won't defend those actions. They were wrong, criminal even. But the people who made those decisions believed they were protecting national security during wartime. Sarah felt sick. How many people died? 7 that we know of. Between 1943 and 1952. After that, more subtle methods were employed. Economic pressure, relocation incentives, disinformation campaigns. The goal was always the same. Keep people away from Sage Creek without drawing attention to why. That's why the town is dying, Sarah realized. You've been strangling it slowly. Not us specifically, Walsh corrected, but yes, certain agencies have discouraged development, blocked infrastructure improvements, denied federal funding, all to maintain the cover. Emma had been quiet, processing everything. Now she asked, "What about the tunnels on the maps? Are there really tunnels under our ranch?" Walsh and his agents exchanged glances. Very perceptive. Yes, in the 1950s, a secret facility was constructed underground, ostensibly for research. Though it was primarily a monitoring station, the facility was abandoned in 1969 after an incident. What kind of incident? The kind that resulted in the deaths of 12 researchers and the permanent sealing of the lower levels, Walsh said grimly. The official report blamed a cave-in. The truth was more disturbing. Prolonged exposure to the unique radiation signatures caused severe psychological effects. The team turned on each other. By the time rescue crews arrived, only one scientist survived, and he spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric facility. Sarah stared at the FBI director. "And you're telling us this why? You could have confiscated everything, threatened us into silence. Why the history lesson?" Walsh stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the ranch land. "Because, Ms. Chen, times have changed. The secret has been kept for 8 decades, but it's becoming impossible to maintain. Satellite technology has advanced. Foreign intelligence services are asking questions, and frankly, some of us believe it's time for transparency." He turned back to face them. "There's a faction within the government that wants to finally exploit these resources. They argue that with current technology, we could safely extract and utilize the deposits. Others believe the risks are still too great. The debate has reached an impasse." "And where do we fit into this?" Sarah asked. "You've inherited the legal rights to this land. More importantly, you've discovered documentation that could expose everything. You have leverage, Ms. Chen. The question is, how do you intend to use it?" Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "What are our options?" "Option 1, we classify everything you've found, provide you with a generous settlement, and relocate your family. You'll sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements and never speak of this again." "Option 2, Sarah prompted. "You work with us. Help us navigate the legal and ethical complexities of finally addressing the Sage Creek deposits. In return, you'd have a seat at the table when decisions are made about your land. You'd also have our protection." "Protection from whom?" Walsh's expression grew more serious. "Ms. Chen, you're not the only one interested in these deposits. Foreign governments, private military contractors, energy corporations, many parties would kill for access to the technology hidden beneath your ranch. The moment this secret becomes public, you and Emma become targets. Sarah felt Emma's hand slip into hers, squeezing tightly. The weight of their discovery was becoming clear. This wasn't just about inheriting a ranch anymore. There's something else, Walsh continued, something not in those documents. We believe the original survey team missed the full extent of the deposits. Modern scanning techniques suggest the meteorite impact created a network of caverns filled with even more exotic materials. The energy potential is staggering. You want to explore further, Sarah stated. With your permission and cooperation, yes, but we need to move carefully. There are those who would prefer the secret remain buried forever, and others who would strip mine the entire valley if given the chance. Sarah stood, pacing to the window. The sun was setting over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. This land, which had seemed like a burden just hours ago, now felt like a responsibility of global significance. I need time to think, she said finally, and I want guarantees, for Emma's safety especially. Of course, but I'm afraid time is a luxury we don't have. Our sensors detected the breach of the well. Others have similar monitoring systems. It's possible that interested parties are already mobilizing. As if to emphasize his point, a distant rumble caught their attention. Through the window, Sarah saw another dust cloud approaching, this one from the opposite direction of the FBI convoy. Walsh spoke quickly into his radio. We have incoming vehicles from the east, possibly hostiles. He turned to Sarah. Ms. Chen, I need you to make a decision quickly. Sarah's mind raced. The approaching vehicles could be neighbors, but given what she'd just learned, that seemed unlikely. She looked at Emma, seeing fear in her daughter's eyes, but also trust. Trust that her mother would make the right choice. We'll work with you, Sarah decided, but on our terms. Full transparency, protection for my daughter, and a real say in what happens to this land. Walsh nodded curtly. Agreed. Now we need to secure those documents and get you both to a safe location. The approaching vehicles were close enough. Now to make out details. 3 black Suburbans, no government plates visible. Walsh's agents moved with practiced efficiency, taking defensive positions while one gathered the documents from the coffee table. Mom, Emma whispered. I'm scared. Sarah pulled her daughter close. Me too, sweetheart. But we're going to be okay. Walsh was already coordinating their evacuation when his radio crackled with urgent news. Director, we've got multiple helicopters inbound from the north. Military configuration, but no identifying markers. The FBI director's face hardened. They're moving faster than expected. Everyone to the vehicles, now! As they rushed outside, Sarah caught a glimpse of the approaching Suburbans. They'd stopped just beyond the property line, as if waiting. In the distance, she could hear the distinctive thrum of helicopter rotors. Who are they? She demanded, as Walsh ushered them toward an armored SUV. Private military contractors, most likely, hired by parties unknown. The breach of the well triggered every monitoring system. Watching this place. What you found has set off a race we hope to avoid. They climbed into the SUV, Emma pressed between Sarah and Walsh. As the convoy of FBI vehicles roared to life, Sarah saw armed men emerging from the stopped Suburbans, taking up positions. They wouldn't fire on federal agents, Sarah said. More hope than statement. They might, Walsh replied grimly, if the stakes are high enough. And trust me, Ms. Chen, the stakes don't get much higher than this. The FBI convoy accelerated down the ranch road, kicking up a massive dust cloud. Behind them, the Suburbans remained stationary, their occupants watching. Overhead, the sound of helicopters grew louder. Sarah held Emma tight as their vehicle bounced over the rough terrain. She'd come to Montana seeking a fresh start, a quiet place to rebuild their lives. Instead, she'd uncovered a secret that could reshape global power dynamics. As they raced toward an uncertain future, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay buried beneath the ranch. And more importantly, who else was willing to kill to control them? The radio chattered with updates as their convoy approached. The main highway. More vehicles were converging on Sage Creek from multiple directions. The quiet ranching town was about to become ground zero for a confrontation, 8 decades in the making. Walsh spoke urgently into his phone, his side of the conversation consisting mainly of "yes, sir," and "understood." When he hung up, his expression was grim. "Change of plans," he announced. "We're not heading to the field office. There's a secure facility about 50 miles from here, military installation off the official grid. We'll regroup there and figure out our next move." Sarah felt her stomach drop as the reality of their situation crystallized. They weren't just involved in some historical discovery anymore. They were at the center of a brewing conflict that involved forces far beyond their control. The worthless ranch had become the most valuable and dangerous property in America. As their SUV merged onto the highway, Sarah caught a final glimpse of the ranch in the side mirror. The old well where it all began was barely visible in the fading light. She wondered if they'd ever see it again, and whether uncovering the truth had been worth the price they were about to pay. The journal and documents that had started everything were now in FBI custody, but their contents were burned into Sarah's memory. Weapons-grade uranium, exotic isotopes, underground facilities, cover-ups and murders. Each revelation raised more questions than answers. But one thing was certain: their quiet life in Sage Creek was over before it had truly begun. Whatever lay ahead, Sarah knew they'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The secrets of the Morrison Ranch were out, and the world would never be the same. The military installation materialized out of the darkness like a fortress from another era. Chain-link fencing topped with razor wire stretched into the night, and spotlights swept across empty ground between the perimeter and a collection of low concrete buildings. No signs identified the facility, no markings suggested its purpose. It simply existed, hidden in plain sight along a forgotten stretch of Montana highway. Sarah held Emma's hand as they were escorted from the SUV into what appeared to be a converted aircraft hangar. The space had been transformed into a high-tech command center with banks of monitors, communications equipment, and personnel in various uniforms moving with urgent purpose. "Welcome to Site 7, Walsh said, leading them to a conference room that overlooked the main floor. Officially, this place doesn't exist. It was established during the Cold War as a continuity of government facility. Now it serves other purposes." Through the glass, Sarah watched as analysts pored over satellite imagery and intercepted communications. Multiple screens showed real-time footage of her ranch from various angles. The 3 black Suburbans remained at the property line, their heat signatures glowing on infrared displays. "They're not leaving," Sarah observed. "No, they're not," Walsh confirmed, "and they're not alone. We've identified at least 4 separate groups converging on Sage Creek: private military contractors, foreign intelligence operatives, and several corporate security teams. Your discovery has triggered something we've been dreading for decades." Emma had been silent during the drive, but now she spoke up. "What happens to our town? To the people there?" Walsh's expression softened slightly. "We're implementing containment protocols. The official story will be a chemical spill from a train derailment. Evacuation orders are already being issued. Most residents will be relocated to emergency shelters in neighboring counties." "You're destroying Sage Creek," Sarah said flatly. "We're protecting it," Walsh countered. "Once word spreads about what's beneath that ranch, the town would become a war zone, Better to evacuate now, under controlled circumstances. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young analyst entered, carrying a tablet and looking nervous. "Director Walsh, you need to see this." The analyst connected her tablet to a wall screen, displaying what appeared to be intercepted communications. "We've been monitoring encrypted channels used by various interested parties. In the last hour, there's been a significant shift in their objectives." "What kind of shift?" Walsh demanded. "They're no longer just interested in the uranium deposits, sir. Someone leaked partial contents of the journal Ms. Chen found, specifically the sections about the underground facility and the tomb incident in 1969. Walsh's face paled. "How is that possible? We've had those documents secured since..." He stopped, realization dawning. "We have a mole." The analyst nodded grimly. "It appears so, sir, and there's more. The leaked information includes references to something called the Phoenix Chamber, something not mentioned in the original journal." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What's the Phoenix Chamber?" Walsh was already moving, barking orders into his radio. "I want a full security sweep of this facility, no one in or out without my authorization, and get me a secure line to the Pentagon." He turned back to Sarah, his expression grave. "The Phoenix Chamber is why the facility was really sealed in 1969. The official reports mentioned psychological effects from radiation exposure. That was a cover story." "For what?" Sarah pressed. "The research team discovered a chamber deep beneath the main facility. Inside, they found technology that defied explanation. Crystalline structures that seemed to store vast amounts of energy. Materials that exhibited properties we still don't understand. And at the center of it all..." Walsh paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "What?" Emma asked, her voice small in the sudden silence. "An artifact, roughly spherical, about the size of a basketball. It pulsed with internal light and appeared to react to human presence. The research team believed it was some kind of data storage device or possibly a power source. They were wrong." The analyst's tablet chimed with new information. She scanned it quickly, her face growing more concerned. "Sir, satellite intelligence shows movement at the ranch. Someone's breached the old facility entrance." Walsh cursed, under his breath. "Show me." The main screen switched to a thermal imaging view of the Morrison Ranch. Sarah could make out the house, the barn, and other structures she recognized. But there was activity near what looked like a small hill about half a mile from the main buildings. "That's the original entrance to the underground facility," Walsh explained. "We sealed it with reinforced concrete in 1969. Whoever's down there brought serious excavation equipment." "Can you stop them?" Sarah asked. "Not without causing an international incident. We've got at least 3 foreign intelligence services represented in those groups. If we move in with force, it could escalate beyond our control." Another screen lit up with new imagery, this one from what appeared to be a drone flying over the property. In night vision, Sarah could see figures rappelling into a dark opening where the hill had been breached. "They're going straight for the Phoenix Chamber," Walsh muttered. "If they reach it..." "What?" Sarah demanded. "What happens if they reach it?" Walsh turned to face her fully. "Ms. Chen, I'm about to share classified information that fewer than 20 people on Earth know. The artifact in the Phoenix Chamber isn't just advanced technology. It's active. It's been active for 12,000 years, possibly longer. And based on what happened in 1969, we believe it's waiting. Waiting for what? We don't know. But when the research team tried to move it, tried to study it directly, it responded. The official report listed 12 casualties. The truth is, we never found 10 of those bodies. They simply vanished. The 2 we did recover had been altered at a molecular level. Their DNA showed changes that shouldn't have been possible." Sarah felt Emma press closer to her side. This was spiraling far beyond anything she could have imagined when they'd inherited the ranch. The survivor, Walsh continued, spent 30 years in psychiatric care, babbling about visions, other worlds, and something he called the convergence. We dismissed it as radiation-induced psychosis until last year. What happened last year? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. He died, but in his final days, he became lucid, completely rational. He asked to speak with intelligence officials and provided detailed coordinates, star charts, astronomical data that our scientists are still trying to understand. His last words were a warning. They're coming back for what they left behind. The conference room fell silent. On the screens, more figures descended into the breach at the ranch. Sarah counted at least a dozen individuals, all heavily armed and equipped with sophisticated gear. "Director!" Another analyst burst in. "We're detecting massive electromagnetic fluctuations centered on the ranch. Something's happening underground." Walsh grabbed a secure phone, punching in numbers rapidly. "This is Director Walsh, authorization code Alpha 779. I'm declaring a pinnacle event. Yes, you heard correctly. Initiate contingency protocol Exeter." He hung up and turned to Sarah. "We're out of time. The president is being briefed. As we speak, military assets are being mobilized, but none of that matters if those teams reach the artifact." "Why?" Sarah asked. "What makes it so dangerous?" "Because," Walsh said grimly, "based on energy readings from 1969 and the survivors' testimony, we believe the artifact is a beacon. When activated, it sends a signal into deep space. The research team triggered it accidentally. We've spent 50 years hoping that signal went unnoticed." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "What if it didn't?" Walsh didn't answer immediately. On the screens, the electromagnetic readings were spiking dramatically. Suddenly, every electronic device in the command center flickered. The lights dimmed, then surged bright before returning to normal. "That's not possible," the lead analyst breathed. "The EM pulse just knocked out electronics across a 50-mile radius. Everything except—" She trailed off, staring at her screens in disbelief. "Except what?" Walsh demanded. "Except us, sir. This facility is hardened against electromagnetic pulses. But according to these readings, we should have lost everything. The only reason we didn't is because something is protecting us. Something is actively shielding this location." Sarah felt the hair on her arms stand up. "The artifact. It knows we're here." Walsh stared at her. "That's impossible. It's just technology, advanced as it may be." "Is it?" Sarah challenged. "You said it responded to human presence, that it somehow altered people at a molecular level. What if it's not just a machine?" Before Walsh could respond, every screen in the command center suddenly displayed the same image, a view from deep underground, looking up through the breach. But the perspective was wrong, as if the camera was floating in mid-air. And in the darkness below, something pulsed with an eerie blue-white light. "We don't have any assets in that position," the analyst reported, her voice shaking. "This feed is coming from... I don't know where it's coming from." The image shifted, moving deeper into the facility. Ancient corridors flashed by, abandoned equipment covered in decades of dust. The whatever it was providing the feed moved, with purpose, heading deeper, drawn inexorably toward the Phoenix chamber. "It's showing us," Emma said suddenly. "It wants us to see." The feed reached a massive vault door, twisted and partially melted from some tremendous force. Beyond lay a chamber carved from solid rock, its walls covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move in the artifact's light. And there, in the center of the chamber, floating 3 feet off the ground, was the artifact itself. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a perfect sphere that appeared to be made of some crystalline material, but which flowed and shifted like liquid. Colors danced across its surface, and deep within its core, something that looked like a miniature galaxy swirled with impossible grace. The armed teams that had breached the facility were there, forming a circle around the artifact. Their weapons were raised, but they seemed frozen, unable to move. As the mysterious feed watched, one figure stepped forward, a woman in tactical gear who pulled off her helmet to reveal sharp features and calculating eyes. "Can you hear us?" She spoke directly to the camera, somehow knowing they were being watched. "My name is Director Chen Mei Ling, Chinese Ministry of State Security. We know you're watching, Director Walsh, and we know Ms. Chen and her daughter are with you." Sarah gasped. This woman knew they were here, knew their names. "The game has changed," Director Chen continued. "This artifact is beyond the ability of any single nation to control or understand. We propose a joint operation, full transparency between all parties. The alternative is a conflict that could devastate this region and possibly trigger something far worse." Walsh grabbed a microphone. "This is FBI Director Walsh. You're trespassing on American soil, Director Chen. Stand down immediately." The woman smiled coldly. "I think not. You've kept this secret for 8 decades. You've murdered to protect it. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, and this particular secret appears to have its own agenda." As if responding to her words, the artifact pulsed brighter. The geometric patterns on the chamber walls began to move faster, creating dizzying optical illusions. Several of the armed figures staggered, clutching their heads. "It's reacting to our presence," Director Chen observed, "growing stronger. The energy readings are off the scale. Whatever signal it's sending, it's getting louder." "Mom," Emma whispered, pointing at one of the screens, "look at the stars." Sarah followed her daughter's gaze to a monitor showing the night sky above the ranch. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Then she noticed it. Stars that seemed brighter than they should be, arranged in a pattern that matched the geometric designs in the Phoenix chamber. "That's not possible," Walsh breathed. "Those stars are light years apart. They can't just rearrange themselves." But they had. And as they watched, more stars joined the pattern, creating a vast cosmic symbol visible only from Earth's perspective. The implications were staggering. Something was manipulating stellar positions across vast distances, using energies that defied human understanding. The artifact's feed suddenly shifted, no longer showing the chamber, but instead displaying images that flashed by almost too quickly to comprehend. Star systems Sarah had never seen, worlds with impossible geometries, vast structures floating in space that dwarfed anything humans had imagined. And finally, an image that made everyone in the command center freeze. Earth, as seen from space, but not as it was now. This was Earth as it had been millennia ago, with different continental configurations and vast cities in places that were now empty ocean. "They've been here before," Sarah said quietly. "Whatever left this artifact, they've been here before." The feed cut out abruptly, replaced by standard security cameras showing the Phoenix chamber. The artifact now pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. The armed teams were backing away, their bravado replaced by obvious fear. Director Chen's voice came through the speakers again. "Director Walsh, I believe our differences are now irrelevant. Whatever we've awakened, whatever's coming, we need to work together. The old secrets, the old rivalries, none of that matters now." Walsh looked at Sarah, his face showing the weight of impossible decisions. "She's right. God help us, she's right. We're not equipped to handle this alone." Another analyst rushed in. "Sir, we're tracking multiple objects entering Earth's atmosphere. Trajectories suggest controlled descent. They're not meteors or space debris. They're crafts of some kind." The main screen shifted to radar tracking. 7 objects, moving in perfect formation, descending toward North America. Their speed was incredible, their maneuverability beyond anything in human arsenals. "Estimated time to arrival?" Walsh asked, his voice steady despite the circumstances. 6 hours, sir. They're headed directly for Montana, specifically for Sage Creek. Sarah pulled Emma close. They had come to Montana seeking a new beginning, a chance to rebuild their lives. Instead, they had triggered something that might change the course of human history. The worthless ranch had become ground zero for humanity's first confirmed contact with something beyond Earth. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice small in the face of such enormity. Walsh straightened, the politician and bureaucrat falling away to reveal the leader underneath. "We prepare, we coordinate with every allied nation. We evacuate civilians from the projected landing zone, and we pray that whatever's coming is interested in communication rather than conquest." He turned to Sarah and Emma. "You two are now under the highest level of protective custody. Whatever happens next, you're key witnesses to the beginning of whatever this is." On the screens, the artifact in the Phoenix chamber pulsed brighter, its rhythm accelerating. The countdown had begun. In 6 hours, the secret that had been buried for millennia would finally reveal its purpose. And Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was about to discover it was not alone in the universe, and perhaps never had been. 5 hours until arrival. The command center at Site 7 had transformed into a nexus of global coordination. Screens displayed feeds from military installations worldwide. Diplomatic channels buzzed with encrypted communications, and scientists from every major nation offered theories through secure video links. Sarah and Emma sat in a protected observation room, watching history unfold in real time. Director Walsh stood before a massive display showing the approaching objects. They maintained perfect formation, defying physics with maneuvers that would tear apart any human spacecraft. As they descended through the upper atmosphere, they generated no heat signatures, no sonic booms, as if the laws of physics bent around them. "Latest from the Pentagon," an aide reported. "NORAD confirms 7 objects, each approximately 300 meters in length. No response to any communication attempts. They're ignoring all standard first contact protocols." Sarah watched Emma sketch in a notebook they'd been given. Her daughter had always found comfort in drawing during stressful times, but the geometric patterns Emma was creating looked disturbingly similar to those in the Phoenix chamber. "Em, where did you see those designs?" Sarah asked softly. Emma looked up, confused. "I didn't see them anywhere. They just feel right, like I've always known them." She held up the notebook, showing intricate symbols that perfectly matched the alien geometry. "Mom, I think the artifact is trying to communicate, not with words, but with understanding." Before Sarah could respond, every screen in the facility flickered. The feed from the Phoenix chamber showed the artifact pulsing rapidly, its light now bright enough to cast shadows. The armed teams had retreated to the chamber's entrance, but seemed unable to leave entirely, as if held by invisible threads. Director Chen's voice crackled through speakers. "The electromagnetic fields are intensifying. We're detecting quantum fluctuations that shouldn't be possible. It's as if space-time itself is being manipulated." Walsh turned to his science advisor, Dr. Rebecca Torres, who had been flown in from Los Alamos. "What's your assessment?" Dr. Torres studied her readings, her face pale. "The artifact isn't just sending signals anymore. It's creating a localized distortion field. Based on these quantum signatures, I believe it's establishing a stable wormhole." "A wormhole to where?" Walsh demanded. "That's the terrifying part. The other end isn't in some distant star system. It's here, on Earth, about 20,000 feet directly above the ranch. 3 hours until arrival. The evacuation of Sage Creek had been completed, the town now eerily empty except for military checkpoints. Sarah watched drone footage of her inherited ranch, now the center of an exclusion zone, patrolled by forces from multiple nations. The old well, where she'd found the journal, seemed laughably mundane compared to what had been unleashed. Emma suddenly stood up, her notebook falling to the floor. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at something beyond the room. "They're not coming," she whispered. "They're already here. They've always been here." Sarah reached for her daughter, alarmed by the trance-like state. "Emma, what do you mean?" "The artifact isn't a beacon calling them home," Emma continued, her voice distant. "It's a key, and we just turned it." She blinked, focusing on her mother. "Mom, I can feel them. They're waking up." Walsh had been coordinating with world leaders, but Emma's words drew his attention. "Waking up? Who's waking up?" Emma turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "The ones who stayed behind, the Watchers. They've been sleeping for so long, waiting for someone to find the key." Dr. Torres frantically checked her instruments. "Director, we're detecting massive seismic activity, not just in Montana, globally. Underground structures are showing thermal signatures, ancient sites, the pyramids, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, dozens of others. They're all exhibiting energy patterns matching the Phoenix Chamber." The main screen split into multiple feeds from around the world. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid was glowing with internal light. In Peru, the stones of Machu Picchu hummed with visible energy. Easter Island's massive statues turned their faces skyward in unison, a feat that should have been impossible. "My God," Walsh breathed. "It's all connected. Every ancient mystery, every unexplained monument. They're all part of the same system." 1 hour until arrival. The objects had slowed their descent, now hovering in the upper atmosphere directly above Montana. But attention had shifted to the global awakening of ancient sites. Each location pulsed in synchronization with the artifact in the Phoenix Chamber, creating a planetary network of energy that defied scientific understanding. Sarah held Emma close as her daughter continued to experience what could only be described as visions. Emma spoke of civilizations that predated known history, of visitors who had guided human development, of a promise made millennia ago that one day they would return. "The meteorite," Emma said suddenly, her clarity returning. "It wasn't a meteorite, it was a seed, planted here to grow, to wait. The uranium, the exotic elements, they were meant to be found. A test to see if humanity was ready." "Ready? For what?" Sarah asked. "For the truth, for rejoining the greater community, for remembering who we really are." The feed from the Phoenix Chamber showed the artifact now levitating higher, its surface flowing like liquid light. The geometric patterns on the walls had become three-dimensional, creating impossible structures that hurt to look at directly. Director Chen and her team had abandoned any pretense of control, huddled at the chamber's entrance as reality itself seemed to bend around the artifact. "Energy spike," Dr. Torres shouted. "The wormhole is stabilizing. Something's coming through." The air above the ranch shimmered like heat waves on summer asphalt. Reality twisted, and suddenly they were there. 7 vessels of impossible beauty, their hulls flowing and shifting like living metal. They descended slowly, deliberately, taking positions around the ranch in a perfect heptagon. But these weren't the only arrivals. Around the world, similar craft materialized above, the awakened ancient sites. News feeds showed ships hovering over the pyramids, Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu, and dozens of other locations. Humanity watched, paralyzed by awe and terror, as first contact unfolded not in one place, but everywhere at once. The largest of the 7 ships above the ranch extended what appeared to be a ramp of solid light. 3 figures descended, humanoid but clearly not human. They stood 12 feet tall, their bodies proportioned with an elegance that seemed to defy physics. Their skin had an iridescent quality, shifting between colors that had no names in human language. Their faces were angular, beautiful, with eyes that held the depth of eternity. "Mom," Emma whispered, "I know them. In my dreams, I've always known them." The beings moved toward the breach in the underground facility with purposeful strides. Military forces held their positions, but made no aggressive moves. What could conventional weapons do against beings who traveled between stars? Walsh's radio crackled. "Stand down. All forces stand down. No hostile actions." The president's voice, strained but clear. "We're receiving communication, not radio signals, direct mental contact. They're speaking to every world leader simultaneously." Sarah felt it then, a presence in her mind, gentle but vast. Words formed not in her ears, but in her consciousness itself. "Children of Earth, the long watch has ended. The seed we planted has finally borne fruit. You have found the key, passed the test. It is without regret or apologies that we return." The main screen showed the three beings entering the Phoenix chamber. They approached the artifact with reverence, and as they did, it descended gently into the outstretched hands of the tallest figure. The chamber's geometric patterns stilled, the energy fields stabilized. The crisis that had seemed imminent just moments before dissolved into profound calm. Director Chen and her team prostrated themselves as the beings passed, but the tallest being paused, extending a hand to help her stand. When Director Chen took that hand, her eyes widened in wonder. "I understand," she said in Mandarin, then repeated in English. "They're not conquerors, they're gardeners, and we're their garden." Walsh received word that similar scenes were playing out at ancient sites worldwide. The beings, humanity's ancient benefactors, it seemed, were reclaiming artifacts like the one in the Phoenix chamber. Each recovery brought more shared understanding, more direct communication with human minds. In the command center, the tall being holding the artifact turned to face the cameras, knowing it addressed not just those present, but all of humanity, watching through countless screens. "We are the architects," the being communicated, its thoughts resonating in every human mind. "Long ago, we seeded your world with the tools for evolution, both physical and mental. We guided your ancestors, taught them language, agriculture, mathematics. When you were ready, we departed, leaving only traces of our presence and the promise of return." The artifact in its hands pulsed gently, and suddenly the screen showed images, not from cameras, but directly into humanity's collective consciousness. The true history of Earth unfolded. The arrival of the architects, when humans were barely more than clever primates, the careful nurturing of civilization, the construction of monuments that served as both teaching tools and markers for future return. "We left the artifacts as tests," the architect continued, "hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to develop the technology to find them, the wisdom to understand them. The uranium was not meant for weapons, but for advancement. You would either destroy yourselves with it or use it to reach for the stars. You chose both paths, but ultimately you survived. You evolved. You became ready." Sarah felt Emma's hand tighten in hers as more understanding flowed into their minds. The conspiracy to hide the Sage Creek deposits hadn't been entirely human. The architects had subtly influenced decisions, ensuring the secret remained hidden until humanity was truly ready. The murders, the cover-ups, these were human additions to a plan meant to protect, not harm. But why? Sarah found herself asking aloud, knowing somehow that she would be heard. Why help us at all? The architect turned its attention to her, and Sarah felt the weight of that ancient gaze. Because you are our children, in a sense. Deeper than biology, we are an ancient race spread across the galaxy. We seed worlds with life, nurture intelligence, and welcome new species into the cosmic community. Earth was our greatest experiment, not just in evolution but in freedom. We gave you more autonomy than any other world, let you make your own mistakes, find your own path. And now? President Martinez's voice came through the speakers, addressing the architect directly. What happens to humanity now? Now you join us, not as subjects but as partners. The artifacts we recover today will power technologies beyond your current imagination. Your scientists will work with ours. Your children will walk among the stars. The isolation of Earth ends today. Around the world, the other architects made similar pronouncements. Ancient sites revealed hidden chambers filled with technological marvels. The pyramids contained star charts and engineering diagrams. Stonehenge housed a communication array that could reach across galaxies. Machu Picchu concealed medical technology that could extend human life by centuries. But with the gifts came warnings. The architect in the Phoenix Chamber grew somber. The universe holds wonders but also dangers. There are races that destroy rather than nurture, forces that consume rather than create. Earth must be prepared. You must unite as one species, one world. Emma stepped forward, pulling free from Sarah's protective grip. The architect regarded her with what might have been surprise. You knew I would find it, Emma said. The dreams, the patterns in my mind. You chose me. Not chose, the architect corrected gently. Recognized. Your bloodline carries markers we placed long ago. Genetic keys that would activate when the time was right. You are what your scientists would call an evolutionary trigger. Your presence here, your discovery of the journal, was the final test. Sarah felt a moment of vertigo as the implications sank in. Their financial desperation, the inheritance, Emma's very existence, all part of a design spanning millennia. The ranch, Sarah said slowly. It was never about the uranium, was it? The ranch was a nexus point, the architect confirmed. One of 7 primary sites we established. The uranium was placed there to ensure the land would be preserved, protected by your own government's secrecy. The Morrison family bloodline was selected as guardians, though they never knew their true purpose. Director Walsh stepped forward. You've been manipulating us. Our entire history is a lie. Your history is incomplete, the architect corrected. We guided, we suggested, but every achievement was your own. We gave you tools. You chose how to use them. We showed you fire. You decided whether to warm your homes or burn your neighbors' villages. Free will was always the most important element of the experiment. The artifact in the architect's hands began to change, unfolding like an impossible flower. Within its crystalline petals, stars swirled, not representations, but actual stellar matter contained in a space that defied dimensional logic. This is a seed, the architect explained. Each recovered artifact is part of a greater whole. When united, they will transform your world. Disease will become manageable, energy will be limitless, the stars will be within reach, but the choice to accept these gifts remains yours. Around the world, humanity grappled with the revelation. Protests erupted in some cities, religious leaders debated theological implications, and scientists worked feverishly to understand the new paradigm. But gradually, a consensus emerged. The gifts were too valuable, the opportunity too profound, to refuse. Over the following days, the transformation began. The architects worked alongside human scientists, sharing knowledge that advanced technology by centuries. The craft that had seemed so alien became familiar sights in Earth's skies. Children around the world began exhibiting enhanced cognitive abilities, their minds adapting to new ways of thinking. Sarah and Emma found themselves at the center of it all. As the first to discover the key, they became symbols of humanity's transition. The ranch was transformed into a collaboration center where human and architect minds worked together. The old well where it all began became a shrine of sorts, a reminder of the moment everything changed. 3 months later, Sarah stood in what had once been her great-uncle's living room, now converted into a communication center linking Earth with architect worlds across the galaxy. Emma worked alongside young people from every nation, their enhanced minds easily grasping concepts that would have baffled previous generations. Director Walsh, now serving as Earth's liaison to the architects, joined Sarah at the window overlooking the transformed landscape. Where sagebrush and failing ranch land once stretched, gleaming structures of hybrid technology rose like organic crystals from the Earth. "Any regrets?" he asked. "You could have kept the secret, sold the ranch, lived a quiet life." Sarah smiled, watching Emma demonstrate a holographic star map to a group of visitors. "We came here looking for a new beginning. I'd say we found one, just not the kind we expected." "The architects say this is just the beginning," Walsh noted. "That Earth's real journey starts now." "Every journey starts with a single step," Sarah replied. "Or in our case, with looking down an old well." In the distance, construction mechs guided by architect technology were building humanity's first interstellar vessel. Children who had grown up dreaming of stars would walk among them. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were already being eradicated. The planet itself was healing, its climate stabilizing under careful management. But perhaps the most profound change was in human consciousness itself. The divisions that had separated nations, races, and religions seemed suddenly trivial in the face of cosmic citizenship. Earth had a purpose now, a role in a galactic community vaster than anyone had imagined. As sunset painted the Montana sky in brilliant hues, Sarah reflected on the strange path that had led them here. A desperate single mother fleeing bankruptcy had unlocked humanity's greatest secret. A worthless ranch had become the birthplace of a new era, and a child's innocent curiosity about an old well had opened the door to the stars. The ancient marking on a stone near the well, previously dismissed as native pictographs, now glowed with soft light. Architect symbols that translated simply, "When the children are ready, the teachers will return." Humanity was ready, the teachers had returned, and the universe awaited. Emma appeared at Sarah's side, her face glowing with excitement. "Mom, the architects are proposing something amazing, a journey to their homeworld. They want representatives from Earth to see the greater community. They asked for volunteers, and You want to go?" Sarah finished, reading her daughter's expression. "They said you could come too. They said our family line has a connection to them that goes back to the beginning. We could be among the first humans to leave the solar system." Sarah looked at her daughter, seeing not just the 12-year-old who had reluctantly left Seattle, but a young woman standing at the threshold of unimaginable adventure. The same courage that had driven Sarah to accept the inheritance now stirred in response to this new challenge. "When would we leave?" Sarah asked. Emma's face lit up. "6 months, time to prepare, to learn. The journey itself will take only days with their technology, but they want us to understand what we'll be seeing." Sarah nodded slowly. From desperate flight to cosmic adventure, life had a way of exceeding expectations. "Then I guess we'd better start packing again." As mother and daughter stood together, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, those points of light no longer seemed cold and distant. They were destinations now, places where others like the architects waited to welcome Earth's children home. The worthless ranch had become humanity's launching pad to the stars. The secret in the well had opened not just a chamber, but a future without limits. And Sarah Chen, who had arrived in Sage Creek with nothing but debt and desperation, had helped guide humanity into its true inheritance. The universe awaited vast and welcoming, and humanity, at long last, was ready to embrace it. The countdown clock in the command center showed 5 hours, 27 minutes, until the unknown objects reached Earth's atmosphere. Sarah pressed her palm against the cool glass of the observation window, watching as military personnel scurried across the compound's tarmac like ants preparing for a storm. Beside her, Emma had fallen into an exhausted sleep on a military cot, her notebook of strange drawings clutched to her chest. Director Walsh hadn't left the main communications hub in over an hour. Through the glass partition, Sarah could see him coordinating with officials she recognized from news broadcasts. The Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, even glimpses of what might have been the President on secure video. Feeds. The weight of what they'd uncovered seemed to press down on everyone in the facility. Dr. Torres approached Sarah quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she offered, extending one of the cups. Sarah accepted it gratefully. "Thank you. Any updates on what's happening at the ranch?" Torres glanced at her tablet. "The electromagnetic interference is growing stronger. We've lost direct visual feeds, but thermal imaging shows the intruders are still inside the underground facility. They've been down there for 3 hours now." "And the artifact?" "Still active. Energy output increasing exponentially. Whatever those teams triggered, it's accelerating." Torres paused, studying Sarah carefully. "Can I ask you something? Your daughter's drawings. Where did she learn those patterns?" Sarah looked down at Emma's sleeping form. "She didn't learn them. She says they just come to her, like remembering something she's always known." Torres nodded slowly. "I've seen similar symbols before. Not exactly the same, but close enough to be variations of a root language." "Where?" "Classified archaeological sites, places that don't officially exist. Peru, Cambodia, Antarctica, ancient ruins that predate known civilizations by thousands of years." The symbols were always dismissed as coincidental similarities, but now their conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the command center. On the main screen, new data was streaming in from observatories around the world. The approaching objects had changed course, spreading out in a coordinated pattern that would bring them down at 7 different locations across the globe. "They're not all coming here," an analyst reported. Projected landing sites include the Gobi Desert, the Amazon Basin, the Sahara, Antarctica, the Indian Ocean, and direct coordinates for major population centers: Beijing, London, New York. Walsh's face appeared on an internal communication screen. "Dr. Torres, Ms. Chen, I need you both in the Situation Room. Now." The Situation Room was smaller than Sarah expected, dominated by a holographic display table that showed real-time global tracking data. Representatives from various agencies crowded around it, their faces grim with concentration. Sarah recognized the CIA director, the National Security Advisor, and several military commanders whose ribbons suggested extensive combat experience. "The situation has evolved," Walsh began without preamble. "In the last 10 minutes, we've received synchronized communications from intelligence services worldwide. Everyone is seeing the same thing. These objects are positioning themselves strategically. This isn't random. It's coordinated." The holographic display zoomed in on the Montana region. The ranch appeared as a pulsing red dot, surrounded by military assets from multiple nations. "More concerning," Walsh continued, "we're detecting similar energy signatures at 6 other locations around the globe. Ancient sites that archaeological records show have been considered sacred or mysterious for millennia. The Nazca Lines in Peru," Dr. Torres identified one location. "The Rishat structure in Mauritania. Lake Vostok in Antarctica. All locations with unexplained phenomena or contested archaeological theories." "Correct," Walsh confirmed, "and every one of them is now showing the same electromagnetic anomalies as the Phoenix Chamber. Whatever was buried at the Morrison Ranch, it wasn't unique. It's part of a global network that's been dormant for thousands of years." The National Security Advisor, a woman with steel-grey hair and piercing eyes, leaned forward. Director, Walsh, we need actionable intelligence. Are these things hostile? What are our military options? Before Walsh could respond, every electronic device in the room simultaneously emitted a high-pitched tone. The lights flickered and the holographic display wavered. Then, as suddenly as it began, the interference stopped, replaced by something far more unsettling. A voice spoke from every speaker, every communication device, even from phones that had been powered off. It wasn't speaking English or any language Sarah recognized, yet she understood every word perfectly. More disturbing. Still, she could tell from the faces around her that everyone was hearing it in their native language. Inhabitants of Earth, we acknowledge your discovery of the Sentinel. Protocol 77 Alpha is now in effect. Remain calm. Evaluation will commence in 4 hours, 53 minutes. The message repeated 3 times. Then silence returned. In the quiet that followed, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. What the hell is Protocol 77 Alpha? The Secretary of Defense demanded. Dr. Torres was already at a terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I'm cross-referencing everything we have on the Phoenix documentation. There are references to protocols, but they're in code. Wait. Her face paled. Oh my God. What is it? Walsh pressed. Torres turned the screen so everyone could see. It displayed a page from the journal Sarah had found, one she hadn't had time to examine closely. The writing was in the same hand as the rest, but the content was different, more urgent, more frightened. Day 127 of containment observations, Torres read aloud. The entity continues to display signs of intelligence far exceeding initial assessments. Dr. Petrov insists we're misinterpreting data, but I've seen the patterns. It's not just responding to stimuli, it's testing us, learning our protocols, our weaknesses. If Sentinel Protocol 77 Alpha is ever activated, God help us all. It means they know we've found one of the Watchers. It means the evaluation has begun. Evaluation of what? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Torres scrolled to another entry. The artifacts aren't weapons or tools. They're judges, left behind to monitor the development of primitive civilizations. When a species reaches certain technological thresholds, nuclear fission, quantum mechanics, genetic manipulation, the Sentinels activate. What follows is an assessment of whether that species poses a threat to the greater cosmic order. And if we fail this evaluation, the National Security Advisor asked quietly. Torres didn't answer immediately. She pulled up another file, this one showing astronomical data. 3 star systems in our galactic neighborhood show signs of catastrophic events that defy natural explanation. Entire planets sterilized, all within the last 1,000,000 years. The implications hung heavy in the air. Whatever was coming wasn't just first contact, it was Judgment Day for the human race. Options! The President's voice came through the secure feed. I need options. The military commanders began discussing tactical scenarios, but Sarah found herself drawn to a different concern. Emma had woken during the announcement and now stood beside her, unnaturally calm. They're not what everyone thinks, Emma said softly. The Sentinels aren't just machines. What do you mean, sweetheart? Emma's eyes seemed to focus on something beyond the room. In my dreams, I see them, the ones who made the Sentinels. They're old, older than anything we can imagine. But they're scared too. Scared of what? Of making the same mistake twice. Before Sarah could ask what that meant, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The holographic display lit up with new warnings as massive energy spikes, registered at all 7 locations simultaneously. Something's happening at the ranch, an analyst reported. The underground team. We're getting scattered transmissions. They're screaming about the walls moving, about reality, bending. The main screen flickered to life, showing a grainy feed from someone's helmet camera inside the Phoenix chamber. What Sarah saw defied description. The chamber's walls weren't just moving, they were folding in on themselves, creating impossible geometries that hurt to look at. The artifact at the center pulsed with blinding intensity, and around it, space itself seemed to be unraveling. Through the static-filled audio, Director Chen's voice could be heard. The mathematics. God, the mathematics are beautiful. Four-dimensional manifolds, collapsed wave functions. It's rewriting local physics. The feed cut to another helmet cam. This one showed team members backing away from something in the shadows. Something that moved wrong, as if it existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process. "Fall back!" someone screamed. "Fall back, now!" But there was nowhere to go. The chamber exit had vanished, replaced by corridors that twisted back on themselves. In endless loops, Sarah watched in horror as one of the soldiers fired his weapon at the approaching shadow. The bullets didn't just miss, they curved through space, returning to strike the wall behind the shooter. "We've lost contact," the communications officer reported. "All teams inside the facility have gone dark." Emma tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Mum, we need to go back." "Back? Back where?" "To the ranch, to the well. That's where it started. That's where it has to end," Walsh overheard. "Absolutely not. That entire area is a hot zone. We're evacuating all personnel within a 50-mile radius." "You don't understand," Emma insisted, her voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible for a 12-year-old. "The evaluation has already begun. The sentinels are waking up all over the world, but the primary node is at our ranch. That's where the decision will be made." "Decision about what?" Sarah asked. Emma's eyes met hers, filled with ancient knowledge that no child should possess. Whether humanity joins the network or becomes another dead system in the cosmic catalogue. The room fell silent. Even the hardened military officials seemed shaken by the certainty in Emma's voice. Dr. Torres broke the silence. "Director Walsh, the energy patterns we're seeing, they match theoretical models for dimensional rifts. If the artifacts are creating stable wormholes or altering local space-time, conventional military responses won't just be ineffective, they could make things worse." The holographic display suddenly shifted, showing satellite imagery of the 7 sites. At each location, perfect circles of distortion were expanding outward. Anything caught within those circles, trees, buildings, vehicles, seemed to flicker between existing and not existing. "Rate of expansion?" Walsh asked tightly. "At current acceleration, the distortion fields will encompass major population centers within 18 hours, an analyst reported. "New York, London, Beijing. They'll all be inside the anomaly zones. Can we evacuate that many people? Not a chance. We're talking about hundreds of millions of civilians." Sarah felt the walls closing in. They were trapped between an impossible situation and an unknowable threat. But Emma stood straighter, more determined. "The Sentinels don't want to destroy us," she said firmly, "but they need to know we're ready, that we can be trusted with the knowledge they guard." "Knowledge of what?" the National Security Advisor demanded. "The network, the connection between all conscious beings in the universe. The truth about why the universe exists at all." Emma paused, seeming to struggle with concepts beyond human language. "There are things out there, forces, entities, call them what you want, that exist beyond our dimension. The Sentinels are barriers, keeping them from noticing primitive worlds until those worlds are ready to defend themselves." "And if we're not ready?" Walsh asked. "Then the barriers come down. Earth becomes visible to things that shouldn't. Know we exist, things that consume entire realities." The weight of revelation settled over the room like a funeral shroud. They weren't just facing judgment. They were cosmic children, playing with forces that could attract predators beyond imagination. 3 hours remain, the synthesized voice announced through every speaker. Prepare your representatives. Representatives for what? The Secretary of Defense shouted at the air. This time the response was immediate. For the dialogue. Select those who embody your species' potential. They will speak for your world. Sarah felt everyone's eyes turn toward Emma, her daughter, who drew impossible patterns and spoke of dreams that revealed cosmic truths. The child who had found the key that unlocked this terrifying door. I'll go, Emma said simply. But I need my mom with me. Walsh started to protest, but the National Security Advisor cut him off. Do we have a choice? She clearly has some connection to these things. Maybe that gives us an advantage, or makes us more vulnerable, Walsh countered. We can't send a child into whatever this is. You're not sending me, Emma corrected. I'm choosing to go, because I'm the only one here who understands what they want. And what do they want? Sarah asked her daughter. Emma's answer was simple and terrifying. They want to know if humanity is worth saving. The debate that followed was heated, but brief. Time was a luxury they didn't have. In the end, pragmatism won. Emma would go, with Sarah as her guardian. They would be accompanied by Dr. Torres for scientific expertise, Walsh for governmental authority, and a small military escort led by Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, a decorated Special Forces officer who had volunteered despite knowing the risks. As they prepared to depart, the global situation continued to deteriorate. The distortion fields were expanding faster than predicted. Reports flooded in of reality anomalies, people aging backwards, gravity reversing in localized areas, solid matter phasing through itself. The laws of physics were becoming suggestions rather than rules. Emma stood at the center of their small group, no longer the frightened child who had reluctantly left Seattle. Something had awakened in her, or perhaps had always been there, waiting for this moment. When we reach the chamber, she explained, don't trust your eyes. The sentinels exist in more dimensions than we can perceive. What you see will be only the shadow of what's really there. Stay close to me. Follow my lead. And whatever happens, remember, they're not our enemies. They're our examiners. Sarah gripped her daughter's hand as they boarded the military helicopter. Through the window, she could see the stars beginning to move in patterns that defied astronomical possibility. The universe itself was rearranging to accommodate whatever was about to happen. As they lifted off, heading toward the ranch that had started it all, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying not just through space, but through history, toward a moment that would define whether humanity had a future among the stars, or would join the countless dead civilizations lost to cosmic judgment. The evaluation had begun. In less than 3 hours, they would know humanity's fate. Behind them, screens in the command center showed similar groups departing from locations around the world. In Beijing, a team led by a young physicist who had published papers on multidimensional mathematics. In London, a delegation including a philosopher who had written extensively on consciousness and reality. In Moscow, a former cosmonaut who claimed to have seen impossible things during a space mission, all converging on the 7 sites, all carrying humanity's hopes into the unknown. As their helicopter raced through the night sky, Emma leaned against her mother and whispered, "They've been waiting so long, watching us grow, hoping we'd be different from the others." The others? The civilizations that came before. The ones who failed the test. The sentinels remember them all. Their achievements, their potential, their final moments. Emma's voice grew sad. They don't want to add us to that list, but they will if they have to protect the greater network from what we might become. Sarah held her daughter tighter as the helicopter banked toward their destination. Ahead, the darkness was split by pillars of light rising from the earth, 7 beacons marking humanity's rendezvous with destiny. The ranch appeared below them, transformed beyond recognition. Where the old well had stood, a column of pure energy now rose into the heavens. The underground facility had been exposed, its corridors and chambers rearranged into patterns that seemed to spell out messages in an alien language. As they began their descent, Sarah saw something that made her breath catch. The stars above weren't just moving, they were arranging themselves into vast patterns that mirrored Emma's drawings. The universe itself was preparing for what was about to unfold. "Remember," Emma said as they prepared to land, "we're not just representing humanity as we are. We're representing what we could become. The Sentinels don't judge based on our failures. They judge based on our potential." The helicopter touched down on what had once been Sarah's inherited property. Now it was ground zero for humanity's most important moment. As they stepped out into air that crackled with interdimensional energy, Sarah took one last look at the normal world they were leaving behind. In 2 hours and 47 minutes, everything would change. The question was whether humanity would emerge from this trial as citizens of a larger universe or as another cautionary tale in the cosmic archives. The evaluation continued. The universe watched. And somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, ancient minds prepared to render judgment on the children of Earth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.